Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the launch of the second real-time review, Afghanistan 1 year on in diaspora engagements. My name is Adrian Borry. I'm a project coordinator at DSC Diaspora program, and I will be the moderator for the webinar today. The real-time review was commissioned by DSC Diaspora program and DEMAC, the Diaspora Emergency Action and Coordination. It is a follow-up to the real-time review that we did shortly after the Taliban takeover of Kabul in August 21. The main aim of this real-time review is to capture the impact, outreach, and organization of diaspora emergency response within Afghanistan. And then we had two specific focus to assess if and how the recently arrived Afghans, so those that have been evacuated, are strengthening the diaspora humanitarian response, and to use a gender lens to assess the response from Afghan diaspora, women organization, and networks. Before we start, a few technical remarks. The webinar will be in English mostly. We'll have one panelist speaking Dari. We have interpretation available, so if you can select Dari or English in the panel. Please select Dari from interpretation option at the bottom of your screen if you want interpretation. If you have any issue with interpretation, please write in the chat and we'll support you. The Q&A session function is also enabled. So if you have any questions during the presentation or the panel, please write there and we will collect the questions and ask a few questions during the Q&A session. As this Zoom webinar format, only the panelists are visible, so not the participants. You are de facto muted. And so the only way for participants to participate is to use the chat function. Also, the event will be recorded and made available on DEMAC's YouTube channel after the webinar. So very briefly on the agenda, we'll start by a presentation of DEMAC and the Diaspora program. Then our two researchers will present the main findings and recommendation from the real-time review. And finally, we will have a panel discussion with the three members of our Afghan diaspora panel coming from Australia, US, and Germany. At the last session, we also have a Q&A that will cover both the panel and the research. So that's where we'll have the opportunity to have questions. I'm very happy now to introduce Rafael Caponi, who is the head of DSC Diaspora program, and who will do a brief introduction of DSC Diaspora program and the DEMAC initiative. So Rafael, over to you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. And yes, indeed, I would like to say a few words about DRC Diaspora program and about DEMAC, as they were both jointly leading on this real-time review. DRC Diaspora program is engaging and supporting diaspora organization as civil society actors since more than 10 years. DRC Diaspora program overall ambition is to support diaspora constructive engagement, space, and capacity as a transnational actor. DRC Diaspora program has also been engaging specifically with Afghan diaspora on various topics, mostly on help supporting joint advocacy messages and facilitating access to high-level fora like the European Parliament, but also supporting access to funding for Afghan diaspora organization and also to capacity building and trainings. Then there is, and you can see in the slide, the definition of diaspora developed by DRC to make sure we have a clear framework when we mention diaspora and diaspora organizations. Then there's DEMAC. The DEMAC initiative is a global initiative. It stands for Diaspora Emergency Action and Coordination. It's hosted by DRC, and it's focusing on the role of diaspora organization in emergencies. So the three main objectives of DEMAC is to increase awareness for diaspora humanitarian intervention, because there's a lack, we notice a gap of knowledge on diaspora roles in emergency, and to enhance knowledge, creating real-time review, case studies, and this knowledge is used to create by both diaspora organization and humanitarian institutions. And then the last objective is to improve coordination communication and coherence in the humanitarian response. So overall, DEMAC mission is to promote visibility for diaspora organization in the humanitarian system, build bridges between diaspora organization and humanitarian actors around the world, and work together to provide a better assistance to people in need. I'll leave it there, and I'll hand over to Adrian to start the webinar and the presentation of the finding of the real-time review. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raphael. Now I will turn over to our two lead researchers for this research, Gudrun van Pottenberg and Rachel Horan. Gudrun van Pottenberg is the practice lead of monitoring and evaluation in INCAS and is a senior humanitarian analyst and practitioner. Rachel Horan is a psychologist with 20 years of professional experience in research, monitoring and evaluation, and development support across rule of law and humanitarian fields. And INCAS is a highly networked consultancy that brings together seasoned experts to provide services in analysis, evaluation, and training in war-torn and fragile environments. For this real-time review, INCAS teamed up with AKS Services, a development consultancy registered in Afghanistan. So, Gudrun and Rachel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. It's a pleasure to be here today and introduce you to the real-time review and explain our research. So to begin with, the objectives of the real-time review were to capture the impact, the outreach, the organization of diaspora emergency responses within Afghanistan, and also to assess if and also how the recently arrived diaspora is strengthening the humanitarian response. And last but not least, to use a gender lens to assess the response from Afghan diaspora women organizations and networks, especially and specifically when assessing the perceived and also the actual impacts of humanitarian responses from the perspectives of diaspora organizations and also the recipient communities. So moving on to our methodology to scene set and explain how we did it. We conducted the real-time review between April to June 2022, and the main data collection occurred during May 2022. And its main elements involved a review of secondary literature, 10 key informant interviews, 9 focus group discussions with diaspora organizations and also their representatives in country, beneficiaries of diaspora assistance, and also international organizations who are operational in Afghanistan. We were lucky enough to have 22 diaspora organizations directly participating and 60 diaspora organizations who were included in our online media monitoring exercise. And data was collected with staff and beneficiaries located in Afghanistan, and also remote interviews and discussions with participants, as you can see in that table, across Europe, North America, and also Australia. And onwards, we had 2 horizontal themes across our findings. And these reoccurring themes really did drive what we identified to be humanitarian and diaspora humanitarian engagement. The first one is the absence of women and girls' fundamental rights. The diaspora organizations emphasize the challenges that are faced today by women and girls in Afghanistan. And the absence of rights informs and frames the diaspora organization's responses in so many ways, in manifold ways. And this theme cut across all of the rest of the themes that emerged from our real-time review of Afghanistan. We had some really insightful examples, and we learned that initially basic assessment for women's demands for support has been harder to assess. It requires male accompaniment, careful planning of community visits without drawing local authority attention. And we then identified how diaspora organizations have changed and adapted, with examples that included modifying formal child education to instead providing teaching materials for informal, more home-based classes. Other examples that were provided included replacing women's entrepreneurial support with humanitarian assistance for the same women's groups. The second horizontal theme that emerged was the topic of food insecurity. And the bleak food insecurity and malnutrition figures were foremost in the minds of all stakeholders and all diaspora organisations, and it permeated throughout the real-time review. And it was certainly an issue that's compounded by accounts of skewed beneficiary selection and real inequality in food distribution. And the beneficiaries also described their experiences of limited international support and also an unequal distribution of humanitarian assistance. And as a result, and importantly, beneficiaries considered diaspora organisation support to have a much greater impact in terms of its reach, its geography, and its relevance than that of other international organisations. And I'll hand over to Gudrun, my colleague, to drill into the detail of the results. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Rachel. Yes, indeed. Let me continue with some of the findings. If you go to the next slide. So what does it mean now in the last year or so? What does it mean for the diaspora assistance that they have been providing? And we found a number of issues in terms of not only substantially what they're doing, but also the way they organize themselves, you know, within a more restricted environment, I would say, of course. And the first thing, indeed, the situation as experienced by the Afghan diaspora organizations, it really had an influence on what they're doing, what they're delivering at this moment. Whereas before, maybe some diaspora were more focused on development. Yeah, now we're in a full crisis mode, of course, with a clear focus on humanitarian assistance, emergency assistance, especially in terms of food, of course, but also then attention to the situation of women and girls. Yeah. But also there's this decreased humanitarian space, you know, the room that diaspora organizations, just like any other humanitarian actors, you know, the room in which they are currently operating. And we really saw that there is a need to, you know, to lower the profile, lower the visibility that diaspora can take, yeah, vis-a-vis, of course, you know, security restrictions, safety restrictions as well. Also doing the real-time review, we had to consider that during our research. There is a clear focus on vulnerable populations, and with vulnerable populations, yes, of course, just as Rachel just said, you know, women and girls, but also there is a lot of attention also given to youth, you know, because they have certain demands, expectations to participate in public events as well, whereas also their education is getting limited. So also there we see an increased focus of diaspora in that regard. And then finally, also, of course, in terms of ethnic minorities and of the population or the people that have supported the international organizations before. So that's in terms of substance, but of course, it also influenced the way that diaspora are working or how they are operating. And yes, indeed, there are a few, not many, but there are a few new diaspora organizations. So that means that they have been established after last summer as such. And there's a bit of a difference here between how older diaspora organizations work and newer ones, where the older diaspora organizations, they already have their networks, you know, their entry points into Afghanistan, because remember, diaspora outside, so also they need to work through representatives on the ground, often personal networks, informal networks, as such. And of course, those newer diaspora, they have to explore it a bit more, you know, they have to see, okay, how are we going to deliver now? They often rely on the older ones to get some tips and advice on how to do that. Yeah, but there's a difference to be taken into account. There's also a difference between diaspora organizations and local organizations, where we have seen that the diaspora are maybe a little bit more, you know, oriented towards advocacy, whereas the local are more practical, more concrete, you know, focused as such. Adaptation, Rachel already mentioned it. So indeed, you know, to what they are delivering, how they are delivering. The report contains several examples of creativity of the diaspora organizations and how to adapt to this situation, yeah, how to deal with these restrictions on the freedom of movement for women or not. You know, we saw examples of cascading humanitarian support where they deliver to one location and then the assistance is provided onwards to different locations. So there's a lot of creativity and innovation as well. If we move to the next slide, I think the main challenge, the main finding in this regard is in terms of funding. We know the situation in Afghanistan economically, but also due to the sanctions, of course, the banking system is extremely limited, and that causes a number of concerns for diaspora organizations. How to open a banking account for newer diaspora organizations? It might not be possible. How to transfer funding from outside the country, inside the country? It's all not that evident, right? How to, collect money from your banking account? Can you still access your banking account? So all those financial concerns, and then we don't even talk yet about the amount of funding that diaspora organizations have. We talk here just about really the technical details of accessing and moving around money. That is all very limited at this moment. Diaspora are not alone in this challenge, in facing this challenge, but of course they are severely affected in that regard. We saw some developments during the real-time review also, if women were able to access banking, the banks as such. We saw a little bit of improvement, but I'm really curious to hear about from our panelists if indeed, this improvement has, stayed on, yes or no. So a lot of things going on here, and at the same time also real concerns, how to deal with that situation. For example, to transfer money or to move around money, personally, is this a good idea? What are the security implications? So a lot of concerns in that regard. That also extends a little bit also the reluctance to share data. So we asked several diaspora organizations, okay, how much money are you receiving? How much money are you spending? There was a lot of reluctance in terms of sharing that data for two reasons. First of all, diaspora were concerned if their funding statistics and data would be public, that beneficiaries would be thinking like, oh, you got so much money, why don't you all give it to us? But of course, diaspora also, have to take care of staff, logistics, whatever, anything that has to deal with organizations and such. And then second, there was also concern, of course, what is going to happen to us if that data is public? Will the Taliban come knock on our door, and ask for parts of that money, yes or no? Then a fourth finding is in terms of coordination on the ground. We all know, this is also what DMAC is about, of course, how that diaspora are coordinating internally between themselves and then also with the institutional humanitarian actors. The situation in Afghanistan at the moment is indeed that diaspora coordinate between themselves on an ad hoc basis. I don't think that's a new finding here. It's just a confirmation of something that we already knew. A lot of informal partnership. It's very difficult also to define now and then, what is a diaspora? Is it a charity? Is it a public association? Is it an advocacy organization? So here it's not all very clear in that regards. But we heard many voices, that there is a need to coordinate more between diaspora organizations, and we'll come back to that when we talk about recommendations. And then finally, there's also a clear interest from both sides to have more coordination between classical humanitarian actors and diaspora organizations. Although there is this clear interest, the question is how to do it. There's still a lack of communication, information exchange between those two sides. Also, there are differences in terms of humanitarian standards used, what should a food package contain, where does it come from, all these things. And then finally, diaspora organizations also struggle with the minimum requirement to participate in clusters, namely to have a local registration in country. So difficulties there, but again, also a clear interest. Let's move to the next slide, and that is just quickly a map of the locations, where the diaspora organizations that we included in our review, where they are providing assistance. And it is just to emphasize, of course, mainly Kabul, as we all see and as is expected, but it is also to emphasize the reach that diaspora organizations have, and to emphasize also the opportunity of diaspora organizations to, to spread out the assistance across the country, and maybe also deal better with certain access challenges of other humanitarian actors. Yeah. What does it mean for the future? Let's go to the next slide. Yeah. All the Diaspora organizations or their representatives that we were talking about shared these two recommendations for the future. That is first, without any doubt, to enhance human rights advocacy, women's rights, girls' rights, rule of law, freedom of media, things that are rather obvious for us. But again, here, the request to enhance this advocacy, to speak out about the situation as it is at the moment. And the second one, that is this practical challenge, to ease the fund transfers. We all know the situation is not easy, but as I said, there are clear concerns, we need the money, but how can we do this in a safe way, without losing donations of international organizations. Diaspora organizations want to do this in a safe way, but clearly there are, of course, restrictions and limitations in that regard. The next slide also here, 4 more recommendations for the future, and the top 2 are recommendations from diaspora organizations located outside of Afghanistan. So their recommendations is about, the priority, or the call for continuous attention to the Afghan situations. Yes, we know there's a lot is going on in the world. Here we have Ukraine, we have other crises, but here the message really is: don't forget Afghanistan. And the second recommendations from diaspora outside of Afghanistan is that there is a need to legitimize diaspora organizations, to overcome the national boundaries between diaspora, to exchange, to strengthen it and complement each other. The 2 boxes on the bottom comes from representatives inside Afghanistan, and they call for a formal engagement with all stakeholders needed. Here, the message was, but we have comparative advantages in terms of humanitarian assistance, but we also know something about development or on education. So how can we engage first with UN agencies in that regard, but maybe also more with technical departments of the de facto authorities? And a final request was also to enhance this coordination between DOs within Kabul, to move away again from this ad hoc coordination. Maybe there is a need to set up a body that deals with diaspora organizations within Kabul, things like that. In terms of conclusions, on the next slide, so what have we learned from the past year, more or less? But I'm really looking forward to hearing our panelists afterwards as well, with concrete examples on everything that we have been saying. But what we have seen is that diaspora organizations they appear to be a bit of a more of a cohesive force in the last years. You have new organizations that were established, but also those new organizations, they actively look to learn from older organizations. So there's an interest to move away from, these parallel systems and to really start strengthening each other. Yes, of course, without any doubt, the diaspora is a very diverse, heterogeneous group, and that's also its strength for sure, as we have seen with all these creative examples, so there's this interest of remaining, of continuing delivering these traditional ways, also including advocacy and education, but then to combine it also with new ways, to listen to the people and to listen to their needs and adapt accordingly. The next slide, 2 more conclusions in that regard. There's also clear interest from the diaspora, as I said before, to start learning each other, to be more of a system, if I may say it that way, to overcome these individual differences and to forge those new pathways in assistance. But it also goes externally, to how to work better with UN, with NGOs, with other actors that are present. So finally, without any doubt, the last year has presented many hurdles and difficulties for diaspora organizations that are engaging in humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan. It has become even more complex than before. At the same time, it also offers opportunities. And I think that would be our key message from the real-time review, yeah, that despite the difficulties, indeed, there are opportunities, you know, for DOs to become formal participants in Afghanistan's future. So Adrian, back to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Gudrun, for a very interesting presentation. Please, if you have any questions, write them in the chat, and we'll be able to answer some of them after the Q&A session. Now we will move to our panel, and I'm very, very enthusiastic about this panel with three Afghan diaspora representatives that are working with humanitarian response inside Afghanistan. So we'll hear from Besmaleh Rezai from Baba Mazari Foundation, Zara Yagana from Bamiyan Foundation, and Omar Haidari for Hasil. We'll start this panel with Besmaleh Rezai from Baba Mazari Foundation. Besmaleh is the CEO of Baba Mazari Foundation. He has a strong legal background and has served on a number of governmental and professional bodies. Currently, Besmaleh is the principal solicitor of Bina Rezai Legal and Migration. Baba Mazari Foundation is a charity organization based in Australia that began a community initiative, but has since evolved into a beacon of hope for many people in need in Afghanistan. The aim of BMF is to empower the most vulnerable and foster sustainable change by making educational opportunities available to the disadvantaged and to provide emergency relief to victims of terror attacks. So, Besmaleh, can you tell us how your activities have changed in the past 1 year since the Taliban took over Kabul, and how did you adapt to the changing needs on the ground? Over to you.
Thank you, Adrian, for that kind introduction. And good afternoon to your audience, I think mostly from Europe, and good night to friends joining from Australia. Yes, certainly the activities of BMF had to change after the takeover of the country by the Taliban, the violent takeover, which took everyone by surprise and shocked the whole Afghan diaspora around the world and also inside Afghanistan. First and foremost, we were faced with this situation for a lot of our colleagues and volunteers in Afghanistan who were really fleeing for their life. So we had to first and foremost find replacement for our our people on the ground that delivered aid to the people in need in emergency. Secondly, this this situation created an emergency that was unprecedented, including inside Afghanistan and outside Afghanistan. We have had people cross neighboring countries in tens of thousands, and who were struggling to find food, and they're sick and elderly, needing funds to get treated. And the second challenge, I think, which is also very common in the theme of the finding of the real-time review, also this issue that we had was the issue of fund. The transfer of funds and the funds that we had in the bank was not accessible, so we had to find ways to transfer funds. And initially, I think we tried the traditional manner of Hawala system, or money remittance provided by the money exchange people. But even then, a lot of these businesses in Kabul could not, for instance, deliver the money. We then had to use our resources to get connected with people, mostly people with resources in Afghanistan, with money left behind in Afghanistan with their family and connection there, and they needed the money in a second country. Some in Australia, for instance, some in neighboring countries. Luckily, we got connected with them, and so we were able to, find money inside Afghanistan through this unofficial means of getting the aid to the needy. Now, over time, I think we have adopted to sort of find other ways, as mentioned in the findings as well. There has been some improvement in the banking system. We can, access some funds over the counter, but it still is not enough for the scale of our work and the need there. And it creates a lot of undue and unnecessary admin work of going to the bank on a daily basis, withdrawing the limit that you can in order to then facilitate the distribution. The third challenge that we had was in relation to the safety and security of our new recruits, volunteers, and team members, colleagues. Their safety was and remains of paramount importance to us. And we have had challenges of balancing their safety on the one hand, and also the requirement of our charity operating with transparency and accountability and reporting requirements here under Australian legislation and legal system. On the other hand, for instance, there was a reluctance of these people sort of collecting people's data, recipients or beneficiaries data and then sharing it with us, which was a common thing that we continued to do in the past. Like we required the delivery of these funds to be videographed and for the documentation of these people to be obtained and submitted to us for confirmation and identity verification and KYC requirements under the legislation. So this was another challenge that we sort of had to adapt to it and find the middle ground where we didn't enforce an excessive demand for these documentations, but on the other hand, we said you can still create these lists and obtain the documents and the signature and videos, but we won't publish it. But they still have to have some documentation here. And in case it's needed, or if we are audited, we can produce these documents to the relevant bodies here in Australia. So that was another way of, the change in our operation, adapting to the new situation and the new environment. We also had, at times, we sort of, reached out to other diaspora organizations. I'm pleased to have Zara Yagana here. She was an excellent volunteer with our foundation when she was in Afghanistan, and she's a prime example of someone who we couldn't, reach out to because she had to flee the country and save her life. Very rightly so. But going to the US, she's joined Bamyan Foundation, and Bamyan Foundation has partnered with us after these issues, and we have helped Bamyan Foundation with our staffing on the ground to distribute the funds that were much needed, because they lacked those resources, and where we had the resources, we have sort of stepped in and helped each other.
Thank you very much, Bismillah, for you're helping me. You're making the perfect transition to our second panelist. So thank you so much for sharing how you adapted to the new situation in Afghanistan during the last year. So now I'm moving to our second panelist, and Zara will be speaking in Dari. So please, if you don't understand Dari, you can select Dari in the interpretation function, so you can listen to the interpretation. Zara Yagana is an author and human rights activist who has been advocating for women's rights for the last 14 years. Prior to the collapse of the Afghan government, Zara was heavily involved in working with the victims of terrorist attacks in Afghanistan, as you just mentioned. And now she lives in the US and works for the Bamyan Foundation. The Bamyan Foundation is supporting education, initiatives, and humanitarian aid for vulnerable families inside Afghanistan, especially for persecuted and marginalized Hazara communities. and supporting meaningful integration of recent Hazara evacuees and community development in the US. So doing both work. The first question that I have for you, Sarah, is you joined the Bamiyan Foundation after being evacuated to the US. How do you see the role of those who were evacuated in the diaspora in terms of contributing to the humanitarian response from the country where you've been relocated? So over to you, Zara. I hope you could understand the questions with interpretation. Sarah, over to you for the first questions. Yeah, perfect.
با سلام خدمت همگی. تشکر شما. اول تشکر میکنم به خاطر از یک فرصت برای ما دادین و دوم به خاطر تحقیق فوق‌العاده‌ای که انجام داده بودیم. بسیار ارزشمند بود و همچنین خوشحال هستم که با همکار بسیار خوب آقای رضایی دوباره در اینجا یک جای سر مسئله بسیار مهم صحبت میکنیم. من سال گذشته وقتی که در آمریکا آمدم با توجه به اینکه تجربه بسیار زیادی را سالها در افغانستان در قسمت کمک‌های بشردوستانه بخصوص به قربانیان جنگ و بخصوص اقلیت قومی و جامعه هزاره در افغانستان داشتم، شاید بیشتر از هر کسی نیازمندی زیر درک میکردم که باید کار صورت بگیره با توجه به اینکه طالبان آمده و وضعیت چندین برابر وخیم شده برای مردم افغانستان و بخصوص برای اقلیت‌ها و کسایی که همیشه در معرض خطر بودن با حال شرایط اقتصادی بدتر شده. و بسیار خوشبخت بودم، خوششانس بودم که با بنیاد بامیان بلافاصله آشنا شدم و متوجه شدم این نهادی هست که میتونه فراتر بشردوستانه در افغانستان انجام بده با توجه به اینکه اینا دسترسی بسیار سریع ندارن در حال حاضر. در اون زمان که من آمدم در افغانستان دسترسی نداشتن. من فکر می‌کردم که میتونه آغاز یک کار باشه با توجه به شناخت جامعه که در افغانستان من کار کرده بودم سالها و فرصت هایی که ما در آمریکا و در کشورهای بیرون از افغانستان میدیدم، فکر میکردم که این میتونه یک راه جدید باشه برای کمک به مردم افغانستان. به همین دلیل ما سری کار خود شروع کردیم و اولین کاری که صورت گرفت این بود که با توجه که خود بنیاد بامیان هم یک نهادی است که توسط دیاسپورا ها ساخته شده و تاسیسش هم مهاجرین افغان در بخصوص جامعه هزاره در آمریکا داشته، ما بلافاصله همکاری خود یا شبکه سازی خود در این شروع کردیم. به همین دلیل من فکر میکردم که اهمیت داره کسایی که از افغانستان بیرون شده باید سر یک شبکه و یک اجماع کار بکنن و زمینه کمک رسانی در افغانستان فراهم بکنن، به خاطر از اینکه فرصت ها در بیرون افغانستان بخصوص در کشورهای کلان مثل آمریکا، استرالیا و اروپا بسیار زیاد هست و اینا منابع زیادی در اینجا اختیار داشتن که بتونن از این منابع استفاده بکنن به نفع مردم افغانستان. به همین دلیل من فکر میکنم که نقشی که در حال حاضر دیاسپورا میتونه داشته باشه شاید قوی ترین و یکی از میشه گفت تنها ترین راه در حال حاضر ما امی راه پیش روی داریم که کسایی که از افغانستان بیرون شدن و کسایی که تجربه بسیار کلان در افغانستان داشتن، اینا با توجه به استفاده از تجارب خود، با توجه به استفاده از منابعی که در افغانستان و شبکه‌ای در افغانستان دارن، میتونن دادخواهی بسیار دقیق و واقعی را داشته باشن با نهادها و با سازمان‌هایی که اونا در واقع علاقمند به کمک به مردم افغانستان هستن. این خودش میتونه در کنار از اینکه مردم افغانستان کمک بکنه، میتونه حتی سیاست به نفع مردم افغانستان تغییر بده، چون زمینه دادخواهی وجود داره. اگر دیاسپورا بتونه یک شبکه قوی را بین خودشان ایجاد بکنن، اما رقمی که بنیاد بامیان و بنیاد با مزاری مشترکاً آمدن زمستان سال گذشته با توجه به اینکه وضعیت بسیار در افغانستان خراب بود و مردم به شدت در تنگنای اقتصادی به خاطر سرما و به خاطر نبودن پول در افغانستان قرار داشتن، بنیاد بامیان و مثلا بنیاد با مزاری در استرالیا اینا مشترکاً کار کردن و تونستن تعداد زیادی از خانواده‌ها را تحت حمایت قرار بدن و این نشان میداد که یعنی دیاسپورا میتونه نقش فوق‌العاده‌ای بازی بکنه. من با گروه‌ها و نهادهای زیادی آشنا بودم و میشناختم که اینا تلاش میکنن، بخصوص افرادی که تازه از افغانستان خارج شده بودن، اینا چون وضعیت بیشتر از هر کس درک میکردن که چقدر وضعیت در افغانستان وخیم است و بیشتر از اون میفهمیدن که ما میتونیم با توجه به اینکه در معرض توجه دولت‌ها قرار داریم، پس ما میتونیم از این فرصت به نفع مردم افغانستان استفاده کنیم. چیزی که من میخوام تاکید بکنم که کسایی که از افغانستان خارج شدن مسئولیت بسیار سنگینی در قبال مردم افغانستان دارن و باید در این قسمت مسئولان عمل بکنن و تلاش بکنن که تمام آدرس‌هایی را که میتونن مردم افغانستان حمایت بکنن پیدا بکنن، دادخواهی بکنن و در کنارش با همدیگر منسجم کار بکنن تا از میشه گفت پراکندگی کمک ها از ناعادلانه بودن کمک ها جلوگیری شود و به صورت منظم سیستماتیک این کمک ها به مردم افغانستان برسه و اونا تحت حمایت قرار بگیرن. اگر ما به خاطر مهاجرت و داشتن مشکلاتی که داریم، به خاطر که تازه آمدیم از کشور خود به کشور جدید بخوایم به زندگی شخصی خود برگردیم، اون رقم که ما فرصت ها را دست میدیم، اون رقم مردم افغانستان لحظه به لحظه قربانی میشن. و ما باز هم تاکید میکنم که دیاسپورا باید به شدت مسئولانه عمل بکنن، به صورت شبکه‌ای کار بکنن و دادخواهی خود از تمام آدرس‌هایی که در کشورهایی که حضور دارن آغاز بکنن و یک شبکه. ما حتی همیشه سرزنش فکر میکنم ما میتونیم یک شبکه جهانی را ایجاد بکنیم. تمام افغان‌های فعالی که در تمام دنیا قرار دارن با توجه به فرصت‌هایی که وجود داره یک شبکه جهانی را میتونن ایجاد بکنن که شبکه بتونه مردم افغانستان تحت حمایت بگیره.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Very interesting. For the sake of time, we'll have to move to our third panelist. So let me introduce Omar Haidari from ASIL. Omar Haidari is a human rights advocate and a media and growth analyst for ASIL app. He works with ASIL to raise and deliver emergency aid to Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, he advocated for the rights of the street children who were deprived of education and forced into child labor. And in Germany, he advocates for the rights of Afghan refugees and assists them with the asylum process. A few words on ASIL now. ASIL is an innovative online startup that creates a marketplace for many artisans from Afghanistan to sell their products globally. And after the Taliban takeover of Kabul, ASIL has adapted quickly to the needs in Afghanistan and added ASIL emergency response to enable everyone to purchase emergency aid packages to support war-affected people in Afghanistan. So, Omar, you are using an internet platform to collect and allocate funding to needs on the ground. Could you tell us about the use of technology for diaspora humanitarian fundraising and aid delivery? Please also share your thoughts about how diaspora can increase their impacts inside Afghanistan moving forward. Thank you, Omar.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Hi, everyone. As you gave a brief introduction about ASIL, I think I will just directly move on with what we are trying to do with ASIL. The problems that we are trying to solve via ASIL is this: that global humanitarian system is broken. There is no end-to-end transparent deliveries mechanism for aid to countries affected by crisis. In the recent example, we have seen the earthquake, the floods in Afghanistan, and recently in Pakistan. And the other problems that we are trying to tackle is that 90% of the global e-commerce happens only in 10 countries. And all those countries, underdeveloped countries, due to lack of access to postal, to fintech, they lack this opportunities to have an active presence in these e-commerce platforms. Our motto is do good, buy good. So we have, as you described us, that we first created a global market for the artisans from rural areas in Afghanistan to have access to the global market where they could sell their handicrafts to people all around the world. So what Do Good is this emergency response. As you said, we initiated this emergency portal after the Taliban takeover. And ever since, we have been able to help over 300,000 people in Afghanistan in more than 25 provinces. That's approximately 51,000 families that we have helped. Energy technology is the core of our platform that runs through everything in our platform. So how we manage this is that in the beginning, with the emergency portal, anyone from anywhere around the world can create a campaign, and they could have the choice and decision who they want to help, what class, what group of people, in what part of the country. It could be an orphanage in the most rural area in Bamyan, or it could be a small school in Kandahar, or it could be a number of women who were the breadwinner of their homes, but due to the Taliban restrictions, they don't have any income. So you could pick up a campaign of your choice, a place of your choice, and even beneficiaries of your choice who you want to help. Then you put a target for your campaign and you raise this fund. We use all our resources to make this happen, and it's all based on technology. For the start, we have a group of volunteers, approximately 180 volunteers actively in 25, 26 provinces. They help us locate, identify the beneficiaries, and deliver our aid across the country, which has made our operations and missions very affordable and very easily accessible. The second, after like this process of identification, locating these people, we make lists. So we provide them with a card that we call Umaid ID card. Umaid means hope. Through this ID cards, it gives us, this is the main thing that makes our entire process very transparent. From the donor to campaign organizer to the beneficiary, you can always find a way to be in touch with them. You can update yourself whether they have received the donations and how do they, and most importantly, if you want to continue supporting a group of beneficiaries or a cause in Afghanistan, through this Umaid ID, you can always be in contact. So this has made the entire process so transparent that it avoids the duplication of the distribution of aid. And with this process, because it's people run, people organized in a very decentralized humanitarian response, we tackle this problem of unequal distribution across the country, because it's people who decides and who choose, who creates the campaign, and which people they want to help. Right now, the e-commerce, global e-commerce platform do not support the underdeveloped countries, as I mentioned earlier, due to lack of the infrastructure, such as postal system addresses, like we don't have it in Afghanistan and many countries. And that's why a seal has been made to make this global impact on the countries that do not have this access. Right now, we have connected hundreds of artisans from across the country. We have registered thousands of their products on our websites, and we have registered hundreds of vendors and created a platform, an opportunity where they could have a circulation of buying and selling and circulation of money through this. When we come to technology, our very recent changes that we have brought, like ASEAL have been now working on a new initiative that's ASEAL Talent Hunt Program. Right now, ASEAL is aiming for recruiting, for developing and empowering female talent in Afghanistan. So these people can apply through a process, a program, where they can, the requirements are that they have to be able to work remotely, have access to internet, and be able to communicate in English. And then we provide them job opportunities, we empower them, we train them with new skills and new initiative. This is one of the very recent initiatives that ASEAL has been working on. And due to all these restrictions that exist within the country because of the Taliban and this regime, this will allow females to work from their home and have an income. Because right before the Taliban takeover, there were tens of thousands of women in the tech and communications and different jobs with different skills. And now we are trying to enable a platform, an opportunity for them where they can work again. The other, right now, we also created a partnership with other organizations such as Women for Women. It's an international organization, and the US organization are partnering with ASEAL to help all those households led by women. So through their partnership, we have provided food packages, monthly food packages to over 1,000 families or households that are led by women. At the end, we are trying to make a global impact. We are trying to make a global market so easily accessible to the most underdeveloped countries around the world. Our focus right now is Afghanistan. As the other two colleagues have mentioned, the challenges that they are facing, most organizations are facing, if it's due to transactions or if it's privacy and data. But with time, and we are hoping that there are, through the international organizations, UN, we will be able to have a mechanism to tackle these problems. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you so much, Omar. Very interesting. And just like for the other panelists, very interesting to see how many collaboration is happening and joint initiatives and innovative solutions adapting to the new situation on the ground. There is very limited time for questions, but I would like to take two and start with one on, and I'll reformulate a bit, one on the situations for women inside Afghanistan. So I will direct this question to Sarah. Sarah, could you share some of your experience engaging towards Afghanistan as an Afghan woman and the special role that that Afghan women in the diaspora can play in supporting women inside Afghanistan? I hope you could understand my questions with interpretation. So over to you.
تشکر از شما. من فکر کنم تنها صدایی که فعلا در جهان شنیده میشه از افغانستان صدای زنان است و قوی ترین صدا هم هست و بخصوص زنانی که در خارج از افغانستان هستند میتونن نقش مهمتری در عرصه بازی بکنن و حمایت بکنن زنان و دخترانی که در افغانستان حضور دارن، زنان و دخترانی که در گوشه های خانه پنهان شدن و محروم شدن از درس و تحصیل و کار و همچنین زنانی که با شجاعت تمام به خیابان ها میایند و برای حقوق مردم افغانستان دادخواهی میکنن. با توجه به اینکه افغانستان همیشه این مردم افغانستان با تعصب و خشونت‌های زیادی مواجه بودند و اقلیت‌های قومی و مذهبی به صورت مشخص در افغانستان آسیب دیدن، زنان جزو بزرگترین کتله و محرومترین کتله افغانستان شمرده میشه و همیشه محروم بودن و با توجه به تجربه‌ای که من سالها در افغانستان دارم نشان داده که زنان همیشه محروم بودن. با توجه به حضور طالبان متاسفانه این محرومیت چندین برابر شده و در واقع ما با سالهای شاید به 100 سال قبل برگشته باشیم با توجه به قوانینی که طالبان در حال حاضر برای زنان افغانستان وضع میکنه. اما ما فرصت دیگه‌ای که در کنار از چالش ها در افغانستان داریم حضور زنان بسیار مقتدر و توانمند در خارج از افغانستان هست که اینا میتونن به صورت جدی یعنی متعهدانه و دوامدار دادخواهی بکنن تا زنان افغانستان را کمک بکنن. ما نیاز داریم به همبستگی شدید زنان در خارج از افغانستان که بتونن با پشتوانه همین همبستگی زنان افغانستان و دختران افغانستان را کمک بکنن. من بخوام بازم میره ذکر بکنم که در افغانستان با توجه به اینکه همیشه اقلیت‌ها مورد خشونت قرار میگیرن، خانم‌هایی که از اقلیت‌های قومی مذهبی هستن چندین برابر خشونت تجربه میکنن، بخصوص زنان هزاره و زنای دیگه اقلیت‌های قومی که به خاطر قومیت خود و مذهب خود همیشه در تنگنا قرار گرفتن. با توجه به شرایط حاکم اینا خشونت چندین برابر و سختی چندین برابر تحمل میکنن. به همون لحاظ در کنار از که من بازم تاکید میکنم که زنان میتونن بیرون از افغانستان نقش فوق‌العاده بازی کنن. ما میخواهیم که مردها هم در کنار زنان افغانستان قرار بگیرن و بسیج هم برای حمایت از زنان و دختران افغانستان.
Thank you so much. That's a pretty strong statement. Let me pass on the word for maybe just a final remark to the two other panelists before we close, because we are reaching out the end of the webinar, and I can see there are a lot of questions, but we will not be able to cover all of them. So we'll think about potentially organizing a follow-up, because we can see there's a lot of interest to the webinar today. So we'll follow up later. So let me pass on the word to Besmela Rezai for a final remark. And because of the lack of time, I will say, if you want to communicate one last message, and if you can make it 1 or 2 sentences, then the floor is yours.
I think that I want to reiterate the point, which is a conclusion of the review as well, that Afghan diaspora is the largest diaspora around the world. We have 6.4 million people dispersed in 150 countries across the world. We must be the agent of the change, and we must, step up to help those in need in Afghanistan, because we cannot remain indifferent. Remaining indifferent is a great injustice to our brothers and sisters who have remained back in Afghanistan. And I just want to also reiterate that diaspora should avoid politics, especially when it comes to humanitarian aid and aid distribution. Our principle in Baba Mazari Foundation has always been, the humans in need. We haven't considered their race, their religion in Afghanistan, and this is quite apparent in all of our reports, which is publicly available.
Thank you very much. Omar, do you want to say some last words as well?
Thank you, Adrian. I would like to request everyone to collaborate and to get engaged and have a collective impact about the situation in Afghanistan. With each day passing and with all these regular natural disasters, life has been getting very difficult for people in Afghanistan. I would again request you all that you can just help anyone anywhere around the country in Afghanistan. Start your campaign or become volunteer with us, or just be one of the messenger in delivering this information and passing this information to other people. And just to add one last point, due to all these natural disasters, thousands of people have been affected, and therefore in the past governments, we had some kind of like disaster funds created that would immediately have a response to things and events like this. But we don't have it right now in Afghanistan. Therefore, ASIL has created a new initiative to respond to disasters or even man-made disasters like suicide attacks, explosion and bombs that immediately affects people, their houses, their breadwinners, and or needs support for the treatment. We have created such funds for it, and it's because to immediately respond when things like this happen, instead of waiting for days and weeks and months to raise funds and deliver them and then finding and creating packages. So please visit our website or just download the ASEEL app, ASEEL. It means authentic. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for providing this opportunity for us, Adrian and DRC, to share our work with others.
Thank you very much, Omar. Thank you to all our panelists, Basmale Rezieh, Zara Yagana, Omar Haidari. Thank you also to our two researchers, Gudrun van Pottelberg and Rachel Horan from INCAS. Thank you to our interpreter. That was really fantastic to be able to follow in both languages. So thank you, Ahmad Farad Bidai. And thank you to DRC and DEMAC colleagues that you haven't seen, but that are working behind the scene to make sure that everything is working well. I would like also to have a last notice. We are co-organizing a professional development short course on evidence-based advocacy. That will be on the 3rd to the 7th of November in Copenhagen at the DRC headquarters. And so we'll post in the chat, we'll post the link to the application process. So it's the second time that we are organizing it, and we hope you will seize this opportunity if you're interested to build expertise on how to do advocacy and use data. Yep, I'll leave you with that, and thank you again very much for joining today. Have a nice rest of the day. Goodbye.